Okay, so get this picture, Long Island,
Oh, yeah.
early 90s.
Big hair.
Yeah, hairspray's like still a thing.
Absolutely.
Shoulder pads are massive.
Oh, total.
And then like this crazy story just hits the news.
Yeah, what it?
The Amy Fisher case.
Oh, wow, yeah. The Long Island Lolita.
Exactly. You probably heard of it like that. But
It's a big one.
we're going to unpack more than just the headlines here because you guys sent over like a stack of articles,
Oh, wow.
court documents, like the whole thing.
People want the full story.
They want the deep dive. So,
In this case, it wasn't just some local drama, you know?
right.
It blew up like nationwide.
Totally.
It became this huge debate about like the media morality, even how the legal system like handles these messy situations.
It's true. And it's got all the elements of a true crime thriller, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like you got Amy Fisher, she's 17,
Okay.
described as bright but troubled, like in the court records.
I see.
Then you've got Joey Buttafuoco, 36-year-old auto body shop owner,
Oh, yeah.
classic ladies man.
Yeah.
And then there's his wife, Mary Jo, total devoted mom caught in the middle of it all.
It's like a classic love triangle gone wrong. But you know what's often overlooked is like how this case played into like all those societal anxieties at the time. The 90s had this whole moral panic about like teenage girls and their sexuality.
Totally.
The media just latched onto that.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Yeah.
So how does a teenage affair, like, turn into a near-fatal shooting?
That's the question, right?
It all starts in 1991 at Joey's auto body shop.
Okay.
Totally mundane.
Seems like it.
Amy brings her car in for repairs.
Okay.
And somehow this relationship sparks between them.
It wasn't just casual.
No, not at all.
Yeah, the age gap is huge, 19 years.
It's a lot.
Automatically raises red flags about, power dynamics, potential for manipulation.
Right.
Like looking back at Amy's psychological evaluations from the trial, like you can see she developed this obsessive attachment to Joey.
Really?
Yeah, and saw Mary Jo as the only obstacle to their happiness.
Wow. So that's where it gets really dark. We're talking May 19th, 1992.
Okay.
Amy shows up at the Buttafuoco house with a gun.
Wow.
And she's not there for like a social call.
Right.
She's there with a plan. And this is important, because the premeditation here is key to how this whole case plays out legally.
Absolutely. She even brought a photo of herself with Joey to show Mary Jo.
Oh, wow.
Intentionally starting a confrontation, things escalate.
Oh, my gosh.
And she shoots Mary Jo.
In the head.
Yeah, point blank.
It's crazy how much detail the police reports go into. Like, you can practically feel the chaos of that moment.
Totally. And the most shocking part is that Mary Jo survived.
What?
Yeah, the bullet went through her head.
Oh, my God.
Incredibly didn't kill her. But, surviving doesn't mean escaping unscathed.
Right.
She was left with partial paralysis and facial nerve damage.
It's true.
Those injuries, they had a lifelong impact,
Yeah.
something that's often lost in, like, the sensationalized headlines.
Yeah, you forget about the real people.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that, these aren't just characters in a story. They're real people whose lives were just shattered by this whole event.
That's when the legal system comes in, right?
Right. Trying to make sense of this chaos and figure out who's responsible.
So the investigation starts. The police are piecing together what happened. They find witnesses who saw someone matching Amy's description,
Right.
fleeing the scene.
Yeah.
The guns traced back to her.
Uh-huh. And then Amy confesses.
Wow.
In her statement, she says she acted out of love, this desperate desire to be with Joey.
Okay,
But now you have to consider the legal definition of intent.
right.
Like, was this a crime of passion, a premeditated act, or somewhere in between?
That's a big question.
It becomes a central question in the trial.
And while all of this is going down, what's Joey doing?
Well, he's denying the whole affair, even with all this evidence piling up, photos, letters, you name it.
Wow, that's bold.
Yeah, and that denial is interesting, because it speaks to like a broader legal strategy that's often used in these cases. He's trying to protect himself, even if it means initially misleading the investigators.
I see.
The court documents show that his lawyer advised him to stay quiet at first.
So we got the shooting the investigation, and then boom, this case explodes in the media.
Oh, yeah.
And Amy gets slapped with that Long Island Lolita label.
The media loved that.
And suddenly everyone's talking about it.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And this is where that societal anxiety I mentioned comes into play.
Okay.
The media wasn't just reporting the facts. They were like weaving this whole narrative.
Right.
The Lolita angle played into this fear of teenage girls being manipulative and seductive, even dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that framing wasn't created in a vacuum.
Of course not.
It reflected these existing anxieties and biases.
It's wild how much power the media had back then to shape public opinion,
Oh, totally.
especially without like the internet or social media to offer different perspectives.
Right.
This case practically became like a soap opera for the whole country.
It was. And, it was a soap opera with very real consequences.
Oh, yeah.
We'll dive into the specifics of the trial and sentencing in the next part.
Okay.
But it's crucial to understand the backdrop against which these legal proceedings were playing out.
Right, because everything's connected.
Yeah.
So we left off talking about how the media turned this whole thing into a spectacle.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember, this is like the early 90s.
Right.
Before, everyone had internet access.
Right.
So the power of those headlines and those TV segments was like massive.
Oh, totally. And, visually, Amy Fisher became this instantly recognizable figure, young, often dressed provocatively,
Wow.
which played right into the media's hands,
Right.
Was she the innocent victim or the manipulative temptress?
Right, like people just crave these like simple categories,
Totally.
hero, villain, victim.
Yeah.
But the court documents paint a much more complicated picture.
They do, and the media's focus on Amy's image almost overshadowed like these deeper legal questions.
Like what?
Like, what constitutes consent when there's such a huge age gap?
That's a good question.
How do you prove manipulation in court?
It's hard.
It's tricky.
So that brings us to the trial itself. Like, it was this whole media circus.
Yeah.
Cameras everywhere.
Ew.
Everyone waiting to see what would happen.
And legally, things got complicated fast.
Oh, really?
Amy was initially charged with attempted murder.
Wow.
That's serious.
Yeah.
Potentially decades in prison, but her lawyers, they negotiated a plea deal.
Okay, hold on, pause right there, because I remember you explaining this to me before.
Yeah.
But for those who aren't like legal experts, like, what is the logic behind a plea deal?
So it's a strategic move often used when there are risks with going to trial.
Okay.
In Amy's case, her defense team probably saw that attempted murder charge as way too risky.
Too risky, how so?
Well, if the jury didn't buy her story, she could be facing a very long sentence.
Makes sense.
So instead of rolling the dice with the jury, they take the deal.
Gotcha. So they plead guilty to a lesser charge.
Right.
Which in this case was?
First-degree assault, which carries a shorter potential sentence.
Okay.
It's a gamble, but it often offers more certainty in a system that can be so unpredictable.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what was the final outcome? Like, what was Amy's actual sentence?
So she got 5 to 15 years in prison.
Okay.
Served almost 7 before being released.
Wow.
But the controversy didn't end there because Joey's legal situation was a whole other issue.
Right, because he initially denied the affair, but eventually admitted to statutory rape.
Yes, and this is where public opinion really got divided.
How so?
Well, he only served 4 months.
Wow.
A much shorter sentence than Amy, despite, being the adult in the situation.
Yeah, and that sparked a lot of outrage because it seemed like a classic case of the man getting off easy.
It was a complex legal situation, and, these sentencing disparities between men and women, especially in cases like this, were a hot topic then, and they still are today.
Yeah, it's true.
The judge in his sentencing statement cited several factors, but public perception often focused on the perceived injustice of the situation.
Okay, so the trial ends.
Yeah.
The dust settles what happened to these 3 people afterwards. Like, how do you even begin to rebuild your life after something like this?
Well, each of them took a very different path.
Okay.
Let's start with Amy.
Okay.
After prison, she did something pretty unexpected.
What's that?
She went into journalism,
Wow.
became a columnist, even wrote a few books.
That's a bold move considering how the media treated her during the whole scandal.
It seems like she wanted to take control of her own narrative. Use her experience to tell stories from a different perspective.
Okay.
She also became an advocate for criminal justice reform.
That makes sense.
Which, makes sense given her own journey through the system.
It's like she went from being the subject of the story to trying to change the system itself.
It's a fascinating example of how someone can take a negative experience and turn it into a force for positive change.
So what about Joey? Did he try to, like, fade into the background after all the drama?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
He actually seemed to embrace the public eye. He did talk shows, reality TV, even some adult films.
Wow.
It's almost like he was leaning into the notoriety,
Interesting.
becoming the symbol of the scandalous side of fame.
So 2 very different approaches to dealing with the aftermath.
Right.
One seeking redemption, the other almost like capitalizing on the infamy.
And then there's Mary Jo.
Right.
She chose a very different path, one focused on healing and helping others.
Yeah, she went through like an incredibly traumatic experience. I'm really curious to hear how she coped with it and what she did afterwards. Last we left off, you were saying that Mary Jo decided to like focus on helping others after the shooting.
Yeah, she actually became a pretty prominent advocate for victims of
Mhm.
violence. She worked with the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, wrote books, gave interviews, really shared her story in a way that helped other people going through similar trauma.
It's incredible how she, like, took this awful situation and turned it into something so positive,
Yeah.
you know? Instead of letting it define her, she used that experience to make a real difference.
Her resilience is really inspiring, and it speaks to this broader theme we see in a lot of these high-profile cases,
What's that?
the human capacity for healing and growth, even when facing unimaginable hardship.
Okay, so we talked about the affair, the shooting, the media circus, the trial, the aftermath.
It's a lot.
You helped me unpack a ton of information from all these sources. But before we wrap up, I want to take a step back and think about what this whole story really means. Like, what can we learn from the Amy Fisher case even all these years later?
That's the key question, isn't it? This case isn't just some tabloid story from the 90s.
Right.
It brings up all these timeless issues about power manipulation, media influence, and how we view responsibility.
You mentioned power dynamics earlier, and it's clear that the age gap between Amy and Joey created this uneven playing field from the start. Like, even if she seemed willing on the surface, there's this level of vulnerability there that can be easily exploited.
Absolutely. And this case really forces us to examine how we define consent, especially when there's a significant age difference.
Yeah.
It's not always black and white, and it's crucial to recognize the power dynamics at play in any relationship.
And then there's the media turning Amy into this Long Island Lolita character.
Hmm.
You know, they played up the scandal focusing on her looks and her age, often portraying her as this, like, temptress. But that kind of sensationalism really distracts from the bigger picture.
It does, because it simplifies a very complex situation.
Right.
It creates these easy narratives that people latch onto: the innocent victim, the evil seductress, the wronged husband. But real life is rarely that neat and tidy.
It's a good reminder to be critical of the stories we're told, especially by the media,
Yeah.
to, like, look beyond the headlines and try to understand the nuances of these situations.
Exactly, and to remember that behind every headline, there are real people whose lives have been impacted.
Yep.
It's easy to get caught up in the drama and forget the human cost of these events.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. I feel like I've gone beyond just knowing the basic facts of the Amy Fisher case. You know, I've gained a deeper understanding of the legal complexities, the social context, and the long-lasting effects on everyone involved.
That's the power of digging deeper, going beyond the surface level.
Totally.
And it's something you can apply to any story you encounter, not just high-profile cases like this one. Always question the narratives you're given, consider different perspectives, and be empathetic to the human experiences at the heart of every story.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Amy Fisher case. I hope you, the listener, found this exploration as insightful and thought-provoking as I have. It's a story that continues to resonate, reminding us of the importance of critical thinking, empathy, and a willingness to look beyond the surface. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.